I believe Blight is a far more egregious example than nerfs of a killer who was warped dead by daylight around himself.
This killer, on top of being a normal killer with no immediate downside or drawbacks, has an incredible mobility, arguably the best in the game, that doubles as a chasing tool, and that can also result in pallet removal, which is really powerful.
You need to shut the fuck up!
Okay, so I've recently been seeing a specific phenomenon within the Dead by Daylight community. Whenever I see discussion about game balance on numerous socials, YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, one subject is always brought up: the Blight. I've seen consistent complaining about this killer, with kids saying he's overpowered, he's busted, that he's a blight on the health of the game. Become an incredibly lukewarm opinion amongst the community, it seems, with both survivor-sided and some supposedly killer-sided pick-me YouTubers saying this about Blight. Now, unlike those people, I am not chasing clout. I'm not censoring or altering my opinion to appeal to the narrative that will earn me the most views, so it's with great derision that I present the opinion that you are all wrong and need to shut up and stop complaining about the Blight. So in this video, we're going to go ahead and dissect all the major points I've heard used to say he's overpowered. He's too fast, his power makes him go fast, which is fundamentally way too strong. Well, yes, the Blight's power is to go very fast. I concede that. Everybody knows that. It is on paper a strong power amongst the kill roster, but to say that that makes it inherently problematic is just reductive and uninformed. The Blight's speed and rushes is balanced by the fact that he's incredibly hard to control while moving at such high speeds. All who have really played him know that the biggest part of his skill curve is memorizing hitboxes and learning how to steer clear of obstacles that will stop you mid-rush, along with learning to flick your camera at huge angles in order to even get hits because your camera sensitivity is so extremely reduced. I don't care what anybody claims, Blight objectively has one of the highest skill floors in the game. With an M1 killer, pretty much anybody can understand that to injure a survivor, you run up behind them, look at them with your camera, and press the button to swing at them. Whereas to get a hit using Blight's power effectively, you have to carefully calculate things such as your bumps and flick trajectory, which take tons of practice in order to be consistently proficient at. Add the fact that whenever you're done with your power, whether or not you even tried to hit someone, you immediately go into a self-stun animation. The notion of him being without downside like these kids say is ludicrous. That reminds me, they often also cry, Blight chews through pallets too fast, being able to break them with his power is OP. When people say that, they neglect to acknowledge that there are over half a dozen other killers who can break pallets with their power, some of them faster and more effectively than Blight. To prove this point, I've assembled a comparison between Blight destroying a pallet with his rush, Ghostface doing a completely standard pallet break, and Hillbilly breaking a pallet with his chainsaw. As you can see, Hillbilly was the fastest, while Blight's rush was actively slower than a normal pallet break because of how he stuns himself. Go back to my point from before. His power being strong when used correctly is balanced by the fact that it is very hard to use correctly, especially if you're an inexperienced player and stunning yourself every 20 seconds. Of course the killer who has such a high skill floor should be better than an easy M1 killer when played at the max level. That is just natural game design. Some killers are going to be stronger than others at the top of the skill curve. When people watch the gameplay footage of the top Blight players winning and think it looks easy, that's only because the streamers have hundreds, thousands of hours on the killer, and have developed so much macro and muscle memory with him that they make it look effortless. That doesn't even come close to actually reflecting the reality of the average player trying Blight, because as somebody who doesn't take this game the most seriously, doesn't have multiple thousand hours, doesn't play it every day, I can assure you that in my time as an on and off Blight main, I have gotten cooked dozens of times playing him. And then these retarded survivors will laugh at me and get an ego in endgame chat because I messed up while playing the hardest killer in the game, who was extremely easy to make mistakes with. Which takes me to my next point. Contrary to the narrative that has been spun, there are still tons of ways that survivors can counter or defeat Blight. Even while having one of the theoretically strongest powers in the game when played at the top of his skill curve, Blight, along with every other killer, is still futile against the horribly survivor-sided meta that we find ourselves in, where generators can be completed in as little as 40 seconds, and whiny survivors are given countless perks and features that handhold them at every step. Part of the survivor anger towards Blight likely stems from the fact that due to his mobility and fast pallet breaks, holding W with sprint bursts and blindly pre-dropping with windows of opportunity are not nearly as viable strategies as they are against an M1 killer. Even then, if you're a survivor who actually knows what you're doing, the average Blight can be juked quite easily in my experience. You can trick him into rushing meters in the wrong direction before eating a lengthy self-stun. Additionally, I actually consider Blight one of the easiest killers in the game to dead hard. You can see him coming at you from a mile away, and you have ample time and warning to hit E right when he's about to reach you. Even if he predicts the dead hard, chances are that he'll be forced into a lose-lose scenario, where he has to pick between hitting you and eating the endurance, or intentionally missing and eating the self-stun anyways. So as reductive as it sounds, if you're a survivor complaining that the average Blight has no counter, you're probably just dumb because you're given ample tools against him and still don't know how to use them. Blight is also far more map dependent than they make him seem. Playing him on indoor maps such as Leary's and RPD can be downright painful, as his janky hitboxes will get you stuck repeatedly bumping in door frames, along with having multitudes of unconventional loops in which normal bump logic doesn't apply. There's just no world in which a killer can simultaneously be anally screwed by multiple common maps and still be considered the best or easiest killer in the game. It's just two irreconcilable notions. Another one of the claims that I've seen floating around is that the devs pander to Blight, that they refuse to nerf him. It's ironic to think that, considering we're at a point in the game where the devs are openly and unabashedly survivor-sided to an unprecedented degree, and they would never even think of favoring any killer whatsoever. Just because Blight is only moderately raped by the anti-pallet update instead of completely raped like an M1 killer does not mean that the devs are pandering to him in particular. Rather, it's a sign that the devs have continuously neglected M1 killers to the point that they're now systemically unviable altogether, which might warrant a video in its own right. But in this one, we're talking about Blight. Again, I've seen kids saying that the devs don't want to nerf Blight. They've never nerfed him. Why haven't they nerfed him? He's too strong. He needs to be nerfed. Actually, he has arguably faced some of the biggest nerfs out of all the killers in the game. They entirely changed his add-ons following complaints. Their effects now are almost unrecognizable compared to what they were on launch. For example, let's look at this add-on, Compound 33. This was at one point considered possibly the strongest add-on for any killer within Dead by Daylight. And it was released in the 4.2.0 patch. If we compare that to the modern version, 8.0.0, it is entirely different. They changed it entirely because people said that that add-on was too strong. Now increases your turn rate by 11% and increases the duration of a rush by 11%. That is not really helpful whatsoever. That is arguably just a worse version of Alchemist's Ring. No true Blight player is going to be running this. They're just going to be running the double speed add-ons. So they took arguably the strongest add-on in the game to something that almost nobody is using. That just goes to show how ridiculous and devoid of fact the claim that Blight has never been nerfed is. Not to mention how the devs gutted his hug tech altogether. To say that he's never faced nerfs just shows a complete lack of knowledge of the killer's history. Recently, I've seen them consistently crying that Blight needs his movement speed reduced. He needs to be made 4.4 so that he's less fast and overpowered. Honestly, it's just funny that they think that. Him being reduced from 4.6 to 4.4 movement speed would not change any of the core of his gameplay that they find so problematic, as good Blight players spend the majority of the match within their power anyways. It would do nothing but make his skill floor even more inaccessible to newer players who can't get hits exclusively using his power. The fact these kids think this would be some kind of major nerf that will make Blight players like myself fall to my knees and start crying instead of scoffing at the minor inconvenience proves that they are living inside a bizarro world and honestly have no clue what they're talking about regarding Blight and the game's balance. At this point, I'm realizing that most of these anti-Blight claims people make just come off in a way where I'm not sure if they stem from a laughable degree of ignorance, denial of the truth, or just downright stupidity. All three, maybe? because I just can't understand how every single mid-witted Reddit user, every single neglected child in the YouTube comments, every single performative social justice warrior, every grifter DBD creator that pretends to have a personality but bends the knee to the dominant opinion repeat these claims over and over and over again when they're so easily debunked. I would go so far as to say that it seems like the vast majority of people never played Asor against him in their lives, because if they did, they know he's not unfair, or B, knows it's not true in the back of their mind, but intentionally grifts and repeats the narrative that he's OP for clout and validation, falling in line, afraid to be truly unique. I just can't with it anymore, which is why I'm putting this video out, spread the truth, put it out in the world, to share the message with however few click on it. Blight is balanced, he has a really high skill curve, very difficult to play, with many easy counters that survivors can do against him. Hell, if I get one single viewer who agrees with this message, I will be satisfied. Because I am not a performative grifter who calls himself a YouTuber and parrots the dominant Reddit 100 wholesome Chungus opinion for clout. I love Blight. I love playing the Blight. I will never stop playing the Blight. And if you hate Blight, well, I don't think you're very intelligent.